Hey friend, the miracles God's performing in our contemporary world sometimes are not real obvious. However, the God of the Bible is still doing miracles today among his people. The Bible says in Isaiah chapter 64, verse 4, "No eye has seen a God besides you who acts for those who wait for him." And we see this in the wars of the Holy Land, and we see it in our culture today. I was watching a documentary on the wars of Israel and heard about many miracles that God did for his people over the last two centuries. For example, during the war in Golan Heights, soldiers found themselves in the midst of a minefield and were desperate to cross it, but couldn't. And suddenly a very strong wind arose, exposing the landmines. After all the landmines were uncovered, the wind immediately stopped. So the soldiers walked through the hundreds of mines unharmed. And later they said that the wind was so strong it almost blew them over. And there was never a wind like that ever since in that area. In 1928, Arabs tried to capture the Palestinian village in the middle of the night. And when they approached it from all sides, they saw an enormous robed men blocking their way. And the figures lifted huge fiery swords into the air. And the frightened Arabs ran into the forest and never returned to the village again. During the War of Independence, Zion Mount was under siege, and 5 soldiers were guarding it when 1,000 Arabs counterattacked. The young soldiers had less than 10 bullets each, and they knew their death was imminent. And when they were out of ammunition, the Arabs suddenly began to yell, "Abraham, Abraham!" And they were pointing above the soldiers' position and then mysteriously retreated. 19 years later, an Arab overheard one of those soldiers telling the story, and he said, "I was there." The soldier asked an Arab, "I'm curious, why did you run away?" And the Arab replied, "A huge figure was standing over your position who we thought was Abraham, your patriarch." The documentary said every time Israel has been attacked since, world leaders have said that the defeat was inevitable. Even President Golan Heights considered suicide and drew up plans for the government in exile because of their demise was so certain. Yet mysteriously, Israel survived. Do you know the military experts in the U.S. Military Academy at West Point won't study the wars of Israel because their outcomes are too impossible? The God factor? When the state of Israel was one day old and attacked by 12 armies on all sides and only 1 tank and 5 cannons, how is it possible that they triumphed? In another instance, how did 5 tanks hold back hundreds of Arab tanks long enough for Israel to receive air supplies from the U.S.? That was in our lifetime. You see, the God of the Bible is still working with God's chosen people in recent times. We haven't heard yet the miracles that God's done in the war against Hamas. Sometimes we don't see God working in national and international events. We don't hear about the miracles because we live in a secular world and an anti-God world. And yet in his perfect wisdom, God's doing what he determines is best for his people. Just like God saved President Trump from an assassin's bullet and caused all the weapons pointed at Trump to fail, he's also working in your life behind the scenes every day. So I encourage you this week to be confident. God's working in the affairs of men and nations to fulfill his will and accomplish your best. So walk into this week with confidence and expectation that the God of the Bible is doing miracles for his people, and that includes you. Well, I hope this encourages you. God bless you.